Hey friends, how are you all today? We are gonna see what if story, so that what if Naruto was Hurricane Chronicles Naruto x Yasaka x Kuroka movie. Within the yokai territory, residing in Kyoto, Japan, Yasaka the Kitsune was currently overseeing the training of a promising nekosho by the name of Kuroka as she practiced her magic and chakra-based abilities, being from a race who could also manipulate these energies, as well as being the current leader of the yokai faction. Yasaka felt that she was the most qualified to oversee Kuroka's training. Okay. I think you've warmed up enough, the beautiful Kyuubi spoke, getting Kuroka to stop and nod eagerly. Now, you mentioned that you wished to show me how much you've improved on your space-time manipulation. You prefer the spatial side of it, yes? Yes, milady, Kuroka answered, speaking respectfully to the woman who took her in despite being a stray devil. I've been able to create barriers that can trap others, or even some of their techniques, inside of another space. However, I wanted to try and create some form of travel between spaces. Not like the teleportation magic that most races use. You mean, something along the lines of dimensional travel like Ophis and Great Red can do? That's right, NYA, she confirmed, her verbal tick showing through her excitement. I wanted to show you how far I've come with it. Admittedly, this kind of technique needs significant energy. So, I've had to pull in some senjutsu to give me enough juice to make it work. Are you sure that's wise? After all, the natural energy of this world has some rather unsettling side effects, the blonde kitsune noted in concern. I made sure to not pull much, though. I think that more will be needed as I keep working out the issues with the technique. A sigh escaped Yasaka's lips, but she nodded in understanding. Very well, gather what energy you need and show me. I'll step in if I feel it's too much. Of course, Kuroka replied before she took a breath and focused on gathering senjutsu. It took a few moments before she felt the power seep into her core, but she bit her lip when she felt the malicious intent mixing in with it. There were many theories on why gathering senjutsu was dangerous. Most of them centered around the odd side effect of bringing in rage or anger that would corrupt the mind. Most theorists speculated that it was the Earth itself that was angry at the various cities of the world polluting and slowly killing off the planet. Others expanded on that theory and assumed it was one, or more, of the deities associated with nature and life that decided to punish those who would selfishly try to take control of what they felt was their power by right. Regardless, Kuroka made sure to stop gathering energy not long after she felt the malicious intent. She then focused the senjutsu and mixed it with her magic, having it enhance her efforts of making a space-time portal. Sweat formed quickly on her brow as she strained to maintain the portal and focus on a different space. Yasaka, growing intrigued with what she was seeing, stepped up behind her current student and studied the portal she was making. Most impressive, she complimented. Have you specified a destination yet? I am trying. Kuroka struggled to answer, gritting her teeth while her two tails swayed in growing distress. It's really difficult to focus this energy. Yasaka nodded in understanding. Even if Kuroka couldn't see it, she was about to offer her assistance before she felt a ripple in space-time echo from the portal. The ripple acted like a wave that made the hairs on her skin, as well as her vixen ears and tails, stand on edge. Kuroka, she began urgently, stop the energy flow, now. The nekosho was more than ready to comply, but the energy, as if gaining a will of its own, rippled again. This time far stronger than the first wave. The power rushed past them, slamming against the two yokai women and forcing them to steady themselves. However, where there was once an outward force was now an inward one that was pulling them toward the portal with incredible power. The two tried to anchor themselves with their power, even going so far as to turn their backs to the portal and dig their clawed hands to the ground beneath them. Seeing as Kuroka was being pulled with more ease than her own body, Yasaka used some of her many tails to grab the feline yokai. Unfortunately, a third and final ripple erupted from the portal. This one knocked them off balance enough to free their claws and make them stumble. With no time to recover from their forced shift in momentum, the two yokai were pulled toward the portal before they were swept away in its power. With the two women absorbed in the space-time rip, the portal closed in on itself and shrank into a black sphere no bigger than a marble. Then, without warning, the sphere expanded to the size of a large building in an instant. Whatever came in contact with the energy was erased from existence. Not unlike the fabled power of destruction that the Bael family of the devils could use, the bigger size only lasted for a couple of seconds before the sphere vanished from reality, as if it never existed in the first place. By the time the guards were able to make it to where their leader and her student were training, there was no trace of Yasaka or Kuroka. They had vanished into nothingness. A yawn escaped his lips as Naruto Uzumaki greeted the day by opening his curtains. Based on the height of the sun, it was still relatively early, maybe just after 6 in the morning. Stepping away from the window, he went about grabbing 2 pots, one regular one and a teapot, placing water in both. He set them on the stove to boil before looking through his cupboards. Finding what he was searching for, he pulled out 2 packets of ramen and a small bag of coffee beans. Placing the ramen aside for the moment, He went to work grinding the coffee beans into a powdered form before placing them in a large cup. The whistling from his teapot let him know that it was ready. So, he grabbed it carefully and poured the hot water into the cup before stirring it. The powdered coffee dissolved and mixed, become the famous morning beverage that he knew his incoming visitor loved. It was when the ramen was nearly finished cooking in the hot water that he heard his door open. He didn't bother to turn and see who it was, seeing as there was only one other person who had the key to his apartment, so, he focused on rinsing his unused dishes as he heard his guest take a seat at his table. A sip was heard before a woman's voice praised, "Perfect as always, darling." He sighed to himself at the nickname she had called him since his childhood. Truthfully, it didn't bother him. In fact, he still fought a blush at times when she used it, but he knew that it was mainly used as a form of teasing. That knowledge dulled the small joy he felt from the nickname. Turning around finally, he saw Smith enjoying his coffee with a small smile on her face. "I should hope so, seeing as you taught me how to make it that way." "True, it would be a shame if you couldn't do this after so many hours of practice," she replied easily, hinting at when she first taught him the joys of making coffee. "At any rate, I heard that your opponent for the finals is that fan maiden from the Hidden Sand. Are you nervous?" "No, just surprised once again at how quickly you found out." "Never underestimate the value of knowing the right people, darling. Those people could give you the information that could save your life someday," she advised. "I'll keep that in mind," he stated, taking time to enjoy his breakfast as Smith finished her coffee. "So, besides mooching off my coffee, what are you doing here?" "Your coffee?" she repeated with an amused smile. "Funny, I never took you for the type to drink this black slop, I believe you called it. Besides, don't act like you're the one who buys the supplies for this place, darling." He relented to her with a sigh. "Thanks again, by the way." "None of that, now," she shot down, placing her empty cup on his table. "Even though you moved out some time ago, I am more than happy to handle your purchases. I had no issues doing so when I looked after you, after all." He gave her a grateful smile, reminiscing on his earlier years when he lived under her roof. Kuroko Smith was a jonin of the village, but she also worked in the social services department of the Hidden Leaf. She was the one who took him in after the matron of the orphanage kicked him out, his presence making potential adopters hesitant to take in his fellow orphans. She had found him on the street trying to buy food when she took him to her apartment and let him stay for the night. When she heard what had happened, she filed the paperwork personally to have her legally recognized as his guardian. When he finally graduated, he had nervously asked her to help him find his own place. It was under the hope of learning how to be more independent since he was legally seen as an adult in the village, while outwardly she was more than happy to help. Unknown to him, she was rather sad he was moving out. She had gotten so used to him living with her that she didn't think he'd want to leave, but she still helped him whenever she could. Case in point, purchasing his groceries so that he wasn't short-changed or given unfair service. She knew people would act irrational because of his Jinchuriki status, so she wasn't going to just sit by and do nothing. While many of her co-workers thought of her as lazy or the type to push her work onto others, she was more than motivated enough to work when it came to the young man before her. "As for my opponent, I was going to have a couple of clones stay here and keep studying those sealing scrolls you gave me before the exams started. I was then going to look for Kakashi-sensei." "You'd be wasting your time on that front, darling. Hitaki already took the Uchiha boy for his own training, considering his opponent is that girl from the cloud who used blue fire." "Damn it," he cursed with a sigh. "Any suggestions, then?" "I heard that a certain author of a certain orange-colored book series should be in town, looking for inspiration at the village's hot springs. Perhaps he'd be interested in helping you out." Naruto nodded in understanding before he went to his room to change and get some training gear. Stepping back out after getting ready, he made 3 shadow clones and headed for the door before he heard Smith clear her throat. "Forgetting something, darling?" she asked rhetorically, a teasing smile on her face as she tapped her cheek with a finger. He blushed tomato red at that before he left in a rush, calling back, "I am not a child, Smith." Her laughter at his exit only made his blush grow, despite the faintest of smiles he had on his face. Just another typical morning for these two. "Okay, so my opponent is Tamari and the bastard is facing that Yugito chick from Cloud," Naruto muttered to himself as he walked away from the main hub of the village to the training grounds. Lee is facing the Gaara guy while Shikamaru is going against Tamari's other teammate, Kankuro, I think he was called. He absently noted that he was passing the sign warning civilians about the training grounds up ahead. That asshole Neji is facing that Dosu guy from the Hidden Sound, and Shino faces the winner of the fight between Shikamaru and Kankuro. The bastard has his match first, followed by Lee's, and then my match is third. This gives me time to see what the other winners will bring to the table in the later matches. Reaching an empty field, he took a quick look at what was there before nodding in satisfaction. Creating a small army of clones, he gathered them into 3 groups of 5 before addressing them. "Okay, Group 1 will focus on chakra control using the stream over there. Smith was able to get rid of that seal snake face put on me, so our chakra should be back to normal. Got it, boss, the representative clone of the group replied. Group 2 will work on what sealing formulas we know so far. The clones back home know to dispel 1 per hour, so use what memories you guys get to practice any new formulas they study. Understood, Group 2's representative stated. The last group will work on this. Naruto started before tossing the clones a scroll. The old man gave me that scroll after he heard about what happened to Team 7 in the forest. Read it, study it, and practice it. I want it at a decent enough level by the end of this training session. You can count on us, boss. The clone for Group 3 saluted. I'll work on physical training in the meantime, let's get to it. Yosh. A deep sigh of relief escaped Naruto's lips as he settled down in the hot water of the village bathing springs. He had a productive training day for the most part. Most of the progress being towards the sealing studies. His chakra control had improved, but he couldn't stand on water for too long before he started to sink, though it wasn't an immediate drop into the water like it was at the start. Instead, it was more akin to a boat that had taken on water and sank. The jutsu scroll he had been given was a wind-style technique that had him create spinning spheres of wind that he could launch at his opponent. The spiraling wind ball, 1, could be focused for more damage or be used in rapid succession. He felt that it could help counter any wind techniques Temari tried to use against him. While nothing was truly battle-worthy yet, Naruto felt that he had a very productive first day of training. Now, he just wanted to get clean and relax. Something he rarely did nowadays. His relaxing was interrupted by the sound of a man giggling pervertedly, making the Uzumaki mentally groan before he looked to the wall separating the men's side of the baths from the women's. Admittedly, he had looked through one of the many holes in the wall when he became interested in the female body and when he was trying to come up with different looks for his sexy jutsu. He could have asked Smith to help, but he didn't want her to kick his ass for being a pervert. That still didn't stop the woman from walking around in a sports bra and undies when it was just them at her apartment. Shaking off the blush he had from remembering her dressing like that, Naruto took a better look at the peeping man and the large toad he was casually sitting on. From that alone, he knew that the man was Jiraiya the Toad Sage, one of the Sannin and the author of the Icha Icha book series. To his horror, Smith had used those books to give him the talk when he reached puberty. He still had mental scars. Better go before this guy is found out by the ladies, Naruto mused, getting ready to leave the water and change back. Don't worry kid, the man spoke up just loud enough for Naruto to hear but not the women. I'll be out of here in just a moment. I got everything I need for the next edition. You're kind of a creep, you know that, right? Creep? He repeated, turning to the teen with an offended expression. You're spying on women without them knowing. You're seeing them when they're at their most vulnerable. That's both creepy and messed up, the Uzumaki elaborated, remembering Smith's words to him when she found out about his own peeping. Why not just use your imagination or something to write those stupid books? Stupid? I'll have you know that my books are art. They depict the perfection that is the female body for the world to read. They're written porn that teach nothing. My guardian thought using them would be a good idea to use those stupid books to give me the talk. All I got from it were horrible images I can't even go to a Yamanaka to deal with. That only made the man grin. Well, obviously they're better than you think since your caretaker used them. Their arguing caught the attention of the women on their side of the baths, and a couple poked their heads up over the fence to see what the commotion was about. They were amused when they saw that it was the bane of women, Jiraiya, having a childish argument with the fox kid, who looked so adorable when he was yelling that many of them mentally gushed over it. Deciding to step in before, by some tragedy, the Toad Sage actually got through the kid, 2 of the kunoichi kicked down the fence and sent it crashing down onto the man. Thankfully for his toad, it dispelled as soon as it heard the kick, leaving the sage crushed beneath the fence and at the mercy of the angry women. As the other 5 kunoichi joined the previous 2, making a total of 7 pissed-off kunoichi, in surrounding the pervert, a familiar-faced towel-clad nurse walked over to Naruto before crouching down, so she was closer to his level. You may want to leave now, sweetie, what you might see won't be pretty, she tried to advise. Naruto shook his head and replied, I don't get to use the springs often, so if you don't mind, Atoha-san, I'd like to savor what time I can get, too. Atoha nodded with an understanding smile. I feel the same, my hours change so often that I can rarely plan a day to use the baths, and even then, something like this could happen and ruin it. She ruffled his spiky hair affectionately before standing back up. Enjoy your soak, Uzumaki-san. He nodded in thanks and leaned against the edge, closing his eyes with a relaxed exhale while expertly ignoring the beatdown happening just a few feet away from him. When the sounds stopped, he cracked an eye open and saw the ladies walking off and leaving a lump of flesh and bruises that was formerly known as Jiraiya the Toad Sage. Atoha was the last to leave, but she turned back to offer a polite smile and wave to the teen. I'll see you soon for your annual checkup, Uzumaki-san. Right, He mumbled, not looking forward to it. Still he gave a polite smile back. "I'll see you then, Atoha-san." She then left, and Jiraiya groaned as he sat up. "Thanks for the help, you brat," he grumbled. "You deserved it, if you ask me," he easily replied, getting ready to leave the springs. "Well, I wasn't, and trust me, I'll get you back for this." Whatever you say, perv," the sage grumbled about disrespectful brats and was getting ready to jump away before he and Naruto heard the sound of something tearing. With that sound came a slight pressure in the air that made their hairs stand on end. Looking up, the duo saw what looked to be the space just above the springs tearing open and revealing an endless expanse of swirling color and light. The sight was so mesmerizing that they almost missed the two figures that fell out of the tear and crash into the springs with an epic splash, their exit causing the spatial tear to close and fade into non-existence. Breaking out from the water's surface were two women, one blonde, one black-haired, and both with animalistic features seen by their ears, tails. They coughed out the water they had swallowed and tried to get a look at their new surroundings before, at the same time, they froze and slowly turned to the blonde Uzumaki staring at them in shock. A spark was felt from their cores, sending a pleasant shiver up both their spines. With both of them being practitioners of chakra usage, the two yokai could both feel the incredible levels of chakra that the young man before them had. Not only that, but his chakra felt uniquely different from the various other signatures they could feel. The difference? He had more than one chakra safely residing within him, his own, something far more potent, two subtle extra ones, and a final one that felt locked away deep within him. This mixture and his attractive features lead them to do something that, to them, made perfect sense. Gah! They pounced and hugged the stunned and blushing teen between them, sandwiching his head between their incredible breasts and leaving him a stammering mess. They didn't take note of this and simply snuggled against him, trying to be as close as possible to his wonderfully addictive chakra. All the while, a certain super pervert was giggling to himself with a nosebleed as he went to town writing notes for his next big hit for Icha Icha. Head call it Icha Icha. Animal magnetism. "Thank you for coming to see me peacefully, Kitsune-san." The third Hokage greeted Yasaka as she and Kuroka were led to his off by Naruto and Jiraiya. To avoid a village-wide panic at seeing another Kyuubi, Yasaka had cast an illusion over herself and Kuroka to appear human. A simple removal of their yokai features was all that was needed. "Of course, Lord Hokage," she replied in a respectful tone, having been told of the Mon's title by Jiraiya. "I understand the need for discretion, considering how my student and I are both yokai who randomly appeared in a human settlement. I was the leader of my faction back home in Kyoto." Naruto repeated curiously, earning a smile from her. "I doubt I'll be going back anytime soon, not that I'd want to if I could." "Why not? Don't you have to lead your people? Someone else will be chosen to take my place in my absence. Besides, I am honestly relieved to be away." "May I ask why?" Hiruzen questioned politely. "There's a paper-thin ceasefire between many factions due to one of them still recovering from a civil war, one of them trying to keep up a facade of the creator being alive, and the third trying to feel out the other two. As for my faction, there's been some building tension between the yokai races regarding the earlier three factions I mentioned. The stress of leading, protecting, and dissuading your people was getting to be too much, I take it?" the Hokage asked knowingly. "Your age shows your wisdom, Lord Hokage," she complimented with a smile. "At any rate, I don't wish to return and would humbly request an opportunity for my student and I to settle down in this territory of yours." This territory is commonly known as the Hidden Leaf Village, one of many hidden villages that house both shinobi and civilians. "You guys are ninja, NYA?" Kuroka asked with an interested smile on her face. "Yes, you'll find many ninja and kunoichi throughout this world of ours," Jiraiya confirmed. "That's pretty cool, Whisker-kun." Blushing at the nickname, the whiskered blonde replied, "I am still training as a ninja. I am part of the lowest tier right now. Currently, a handful of our genin, the rank Naruto-kun currently holds, are training for the remainder of this month in preparation for the final portion of what's known as the chunin exams," the Hokage explained. "Chunin being the next rank, I take it?" Yasaka queried. "Yep," Naruto answered, "the ranks we have are genin, then chunin, then jonin." Yasaka nodded in understanding before an idea struck her. "Lord Hokage, would you allow me to assist Naruto-kun in his training? As a kitsune, I have an understanding of chakra and have been working with Kuroka on improving her control over it. It was during an experimental usage of chakra that we were brought here to your village. Or, perhaps the term world is more fitting in this case." Hiruzen thought about her request. Knowing that Naruto wasn't having much luck in finding anyone to help him get ready, Kakashi had taken Sasuke away from the village to train. The other Jonin sensei were focusing on their students, and many of the other Jonin were busy with missions or village security in the wake of Orochimaru's appearance. If Yasaka and Kuroka hadn't shown up, The elderly Kage had no doubt that Jiraiya would have taken Naruto under his wing, seeing as Kuroko was also busy in the social services department. Jiraiya, he began, earning his old student's attention, would you mind Yasaka-san taking over? The man looked honestly conflicted. He had hoped to use this opportunity to finally establish a connection with his godson, the same godson he had never visited and only helped by sending funds to Kuroko as she looked after him, but still, he couldn't deny that learning from a Kyuubi, one who had no interest in destroying the village, would be a huge boon to Naruto, perhaps even in regard to dealing with his Kyuubi. So, he nodded in acquiescence. I don't see any problem with it, I'll just check in now and then. Wait, Naruto cut in, why would you check in on my training when you never even offered to train me in the first place? Don't act so innocent here, kid, I know that Kuroko told you I'd most likely be at the hot springs and would probably train you. The blonde Uzumaki huffed, attempting to hide his embarrassment at getting caught, smug pervert. Laughing boisterously at the grumbling Uzumaki, the Toad Sage turned to Yasaka with a grin. He's all yours, Yasaka, make sure he gives everyone a show to remember, I'll be betting on him, after all. Naruto looked surprised at that, not being used to having someone believe in him so strongly. He almost jumped when a soft hand placed itself on his shoulder, and he looked up to see that it belonged to Yasaka, who had a smirk on her beautiful face. But of course, any student of mine is sure to be nothing but the best, she assured everyone, even Naruto, who was now becoming eager to start. Alright. NYA, cheered Kuroka, sounding as eager as Naruto was feeling, with sensei teaching us, Whisker-kun and I will be the best there ever was. Unable to stop his grin, Naruto replied, damn right, Kuroka. Before any of that, Hiruzen cut in, I think your teacher may need to know about your circumstances, Naruto-kun. Immediately getting what he was talking about, the eagerness to begin washed away from Naruto with a sigh, yeah, I think so too. Okay, what I want to see before I decide on how best to train you is what you know right now, Naruto-kun, Yasaka stated, standing across from her two students in a private training ground provided to them by the Hokage. The privacy allowed for both women to let their natural yokai features be seen, neither liking the feeling of illusionary magic covering their bodies. Right, Naruto began, taking the time to show Yasaka everything he knew. Shadow clones, transformation as well as his sexy jutsu, which earned him a laugh from Kuroka while Yasaka merely chuckled. Replacement, and finally, the spiraling wind ball. 4 techniques, mused the Kitsune woman, I am of the notion of quality over quantity, but I also know that more techniques will be necessary to fight. Luckily these shadow clones of yours can transfer what they learn to you, so, I want you to create 4 groups of 5 clones. Nodding, Naruto created the requested clones and separated them into the 4 groups. Now what, sensei? Mentally smiling at the title, Yasaka answered. 1 group will keep working on mastering the spiraling wind ball technique. I can tell you we're just starting to learn that one. Let's go, guys. One of the clones announced, leading his brothers to another part of the training ground so that they weren't in anyone's way. The second group will take this time to go over any and all possible opponents you'll be facing and ways to counter what they might do in their fights. That's it, then, the representative of Group 2 stated, leading his team to a nearby tree so that they can sit and discuss. Third will go with Kuroka, she's a natural-born fighter, so she will have each clone spar with her and point out any flaws in your fighting style. Admittedly, I don't have a fighting style, Naruto confessed. That's fine, she can help you with basic stances and forms that you can use, anyone can focus on one style. But the basics are the foundation to any and all styles, and you'd be surprised how many styles share similar basics. Come on now, boys, Kuroka called out with a slight purr, let's see if you can pound this pussy, NYA. All the clones of Group 3 sported neon red faces as they shuffled after the shameless Neko show. The last group will meditate, Yasaka stated. Having a calm mind and being able to maintain control over yourself will go a long way in controlling your chakra. This will also be that first steps of other training I want to go over with you throughout this month. Let's go into the shade over here, the leader of Group 4 suggested, taking his fellow clones to a shaded spot to begin their training. And lastly, you yourself, Naruto-kun, will attempt to make contact with the Kyuubi within you. I'll be assisting you because I wish to see the difference between a chakra-based Kyuubi and myself. Okay. I am not sure what to expect from the fox, but I know that it's super destructive since it nearly destroyed the village years ago. She smiled at him reassuringly, no need to be nervous, if something goes wrong, I'll be right here to help you. Feeling a bit better after that, Naruto took a few deep breaths before mentally calling out to his seal, hey, fox, you there? I was hoping we could talk. He heard nothing respond back to him, so he tried again. Listen, I know you probably want nothing to do with me, considering how you're stuck in me, but I just want to talk. I am not asking for any of your chakra or anything like that. More silence. I honestly would rather have you out of me, too, but I know that releasing you would kill me. Not to mention leave you open for others to try and capture you again, so, maybe we can come to some sort of understanding. That won't happen though if you don't talk to me. When there was no reply again, he was about to give up before he felt a hard tug on his consciousness. Everything went dark as his body fell to the ground with glazed over eyes. Watching this happen, Yasaka gently lifted up his head and rested it on her lap, running her fingers through his hair. She smiled softly at him before placing a free hand on his seal and channeling some of her power. Soon, her eyes also glazed over as her consciousness dived into the representation of Naruto's seal. Where her fellow Kyuubi resided, I see, Kuroko mused aloud. Having been informed of the situation surrounding her favorite blonde by the Hokage, I assume that this yokai has taken over his training? You'd assume correctly. I have provided them a private training ground so that Yasaka-san and her student, Kuroka, won't be bothered by the public. Makes sense, agreed the woman, sitting in her chair with a leg crossed over the other as she sipped her cup of coffee. Sir, I'd like to take responsibility for their stay here in the village. That's a surprise, considering how unmotivated you behave regarding taking responsibility for other social cases, the Hokage pointed out, earning a careless shrug from Kuroko. There aren't many cases that caught my eye. Naruto's case was interesting considering who he is. Not just what he is. In the case of these two new faces, it's the opposite. It's what they are that has my full attention, she explained. Eventually, I think I'll try to make a sort of team with the three of them, along with any other special cases that may or may not pop up in the future. A team? Yep. A team of, as far as public opinion is concerned, misfits who can prove to do some real good for the village and as a whole. I can see why that would capture your interest, admitted the elderly man. We'll have to discuss this potential project of yours at a later date, preferably when this mess Orochimaru's presence has created is dealt with. Of course, no rush at all, Lord Hokage. However, regarding my request to take responsibility. Granted, you've proven yourself very capable with Naruto's growth. I'll sign off on the forms as soon as you fill them out. Raising her cup in both thanks and understanding, she stood up and left the Hokage's office. She had some work to do. Work she didn't plan to shove onto someone else. So, this is what a real Kyuubi looks like when not accessing their power, mused the Biju from behind the bars of its cage. You look far too human for my tastes. Regardless of your vulpine features on display. And your power would have eclipsed my own with ease, if it was whole, fired back the yokai with a smirk. Faye, I don't need my missing half to obliterate you. I don't doubt that, but I wouldn't make it easy for you, not by a long shot. Can we not get into a tail measuring contest inside the seal, please? Naruto deadpanned, at their curious expressions. He grumbled in embarrassment, can't exactly call it dick measuring when neither of you have them, Ibeo. Both Kyuubi chuckled at his embarrassed face for different reasons. Anyway, thanks for letting me talk to you, Kyuubi, Naruto continued. I know that neither of us are a fan of this situation we have. But I'd rather work with you than try to ignore you or shut you out. That'd make me no better than the villagers when I was growing up. Yasaka looked interested at that while the Kyuubi snorted and laid down on its forepaws. And what do you suggest we do to work together? I don't know, I doubt you'd just let me use your power, but maybe you'd be willing to help me in emergencies? Or as a last resort? And what would I get in return for access to my vast chakra? I can try to look for a way to give you some more freedom, aside from releasing you, he offered. I doubt you like being behind bars in this dark place for the rest of my life. True, seeing the same shadowed hall and unmoving bars got rather dull after the first few hours of consciousness in here. If I could contribute to this deal you both are making, Yasaka spoke up, earning their attention. Back in my world, those who use chakra can turn their very life force into a weapon to strengthen their bodies and target the life force of others. If Naruto-kun could utilize your chakra to train in this method, I'd be more than happy to assist him in searching for a way to give you a sense of freedom. After all, I have access to chakra, demonic power, and magic to help us in this venture. Naruto looked interested at the idea, turning to the Kyuubi to see what it thought. Well, taking a moment to go over the deal, both original and add-on, the Kyuubi eventually reached the tip of one of its tails through a space between the bars. The tip stopped in front of the blonde Uzumaki and crimson eyes locked onto cerulean ones. Deal, it's not much, Kuroko began, showing her 3 wards the new place that they would be living in. But it's large enough to house you and anyone else I might decide to look after. 10 rooms, 4 baths, a large kitchen, and a private training ground. Not bad, if I do say so myself. Naruto rolled his eyes and smiled at the woman tooting her own horn. You didn't have to do this. True, but I wanted to do this for you and your new guests, darling, she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Besides, it'll be staying here as well. So, it'll be just like old times, only with more people. He chuckled at that. Yeah, old times. Now, you have a little over 3 weeks left of this month to get ready for the finals. I suggest using your time wisely while letting me deal with furbishing this place to make it into a home instead of a base. How did you acquire a place like this, anyway? Kuroka asked, looking around the large guest area of the building. Oh, some rich snob didn't like how this place was made, so, he placed it in the care of the village's realtors who couldn't find anyone willing to buy it for the price the snob wanted, so, I gave them an offer that made them think they came out on top, when really they didn't. How so? Yasaka curiously asked. I merely mentioned darling over here, and they jumped at the chance to keep him far from the populace, as I am sure you know, many people dislike him. So, I used that misguided dislike to our advantage. Not sure I like seeing the village hating or fearing me as an advantage, Naruto cut in with a slight grimace. As a ninja in training, you must be ready to take advantage of any situation whenever you can. I know it's wrong to play on your status as a Jinchuriki. But at least it got us this place that's private enough for these two. She gestured to the two yokai women, to not need to hide their natural features, not to mention this place is far better than that apartment you were living in. I suppose, still not a fan, though, and that's completely understandable, and I apologize for making you feel that way. However, as your social worker and, more importantly, someone who wants to see you succeed, I'll do what I can to give you the tools to do so. He couldn't help smiling at that, surprising the woman with a hug, due to his smaller height, his head pressed against her breast while his arms wrapped around her midsection. Thank you. She smiled softly and had one hand wrap around his shoulders while the other pressed his head further against her breast. You're very welcome, darling. Yasaka and Kuroka both smiled at their moment, deciding to give them some space to explore the building. After a few minutes of just holding one another, the two finally let go. Naruto had an embarrassed blush, having just realized what his cheek was touching, while Kuroko had an easygoing smile on her face with the pink on her cheeks being nearly invisible. He is her favorite blonde brat in village, after all. Naruto, outlined in a thin orange aura, held a basic stance as he stood across from Kuroka. The Nekosho was in a stance that had her balanced on her feet with her claws at the ready and her amber eyes sharp and attentive. With nothing said, the two vanished and reappeared in the center of the field, both locked against one another and trying to gain ground. After a few seconds of struggling, the two backed off before charging again. Naruto went with a flow only he could feel, throwing punches, elbows, and kicks that Kuroka avoided with her feline grace. She herself tried to catch him with slashes from her claws and kicks. Even trying to trap his limbs with one of her two tails, however, he deflected everything she threw at him. Both were even, Kuroka being evasive and Naruto being defensive in terms of countering the attacks of the other. Finding an opening, Naruto clapped his hands together before sending a burst of raw wind chakra at Kuroka. But she leapt away from the crude wave of wind and retaliated with a ball of fire magic that he backhanded away from him when it got close enough. She grinned at his actions, crouching down on all fours with her tail swaying excitedly and her pupils narrowing into thin slits. In a blur, she appeared in front of him, but he surprised her by halting her advance with a vice grip hold on her extended wrist. Her surprise cost her, for she was pulled into a harsh knee that slammed into her gut and sent her sprawling back. Rolling to a stop, she coughed and tried to catch her breath while Yasaka walked over and nodded approvingly. Excellent spar. You two. Both of you played to your strengths and kept the other on their toes. It was only when Naruto reacted in time with your improved speed that you faltered. Kuroka, you must know not to underestimate your opponent, no matter who they are. Yes, sensei, she replied, being helped to her feet by Naruto. She smiled gratefully for the gesture, her cheeks slightly flushed from both the fight and her rising emotions. It wasn't her fault that her instincts were telling her that her perfect mate was right beside her. Now Naruto, Yasaka continued, understand that the use of Tuki is not to be mishandled. One misstep and you damage your life force. Something that can prove to be very disastrous to you, no matter if the Kyuubi tries to help you. Am I clear? Crystal clear, sensei. I promise not to misuse this technique. She smiled and nodded once. Good man. Now, take some time to rest before we move on to your jutsu, but before that, I'd like to know something. What's that? Why did you deny signing the Toad contract that the perverted hermit offered to you? No real reason other than I didn't want to be seen as another Toad summoner like him and the fourth. They both already made names for themselves thanks to the Toads and other techniques. I'll try out the hand seals later and see what happens like Pervy Sage did when he was a genin. I see. Be careful, though, you won't know where you'll end up until it's too late. Yeah, try not to get killed, Whisker-kun, Kuroka added, showing her own concerns about Naruto's plan. I will. Promise, he assured them. For now, I am going to rest like you said, sensei. I'd like to be back to 100% before I start working on ninjutsu. Alright then, Kuroka, come with me. We'll keep working on your yojutsu while Naruto practices, Yasaka stated. Yes, sensei, the Nekosho replied before taking a moment to lean over to Naruto and kiss him on the cheek. Right on his whisker markings, smiling slyly at the blush on his face, she followed after Yasaka while looking back to give him a flirty wink. Work hard, Whisker-kun. Still blushing, Naruto went off to a different area of the training ground. As he walked, he took a couple of breaths to recompose himself before stopping when he felt he was far enough. Okay, Naruto said to himself, raising a hand up to bite his thumb and draw blood. Here we go. He slowly went through the necessary hand seals for the jutsu: boar, dog, bird, monkey, ram. With his bloody hand slamming onto the ground, Naruto's built-up chakra spread out in a large circle made of various kanji as he cried out, summoning jutsu. And then, in a burst of smoke, he vanished. It was finally time. The seats were filled with spectators, both visiting and residential. The viewing booths were occupied by important dignitaries from various nations. The cage suite was currently taken by the Hokage, the Kase cage, and the Raikage. And down on the circular field were the genin taking part in the finals of the chunin exams along with the jonin who would act as proctor for the matches. From left to right there was Yugito Ni of the Hidden Cloud, Shikamaru Nara of the Hidden Leaf, Konkuro of the Hidden Sand, Neji Hyuga of the Hidden Leaf, Rock Lee of the Hidden Leaf, Tamari of the Hidden Sand, Shino Aburame of the Hidden Leaf, Gaara of the Hidden Sand, and finally, Naruto Uzumaki of the Hidden Leaf. Dressed differently for the event, thanks to the three women in his life, Naruto was seen wearing black ninja sandals and orange pants, over which he wore a black uniform jacket with an orange zipper and buttons on the waist and sleeves. On his left arm, he wore a red band with the Uzumaki clan symbol stitched into it, while his new headband's wrap was more elastic and held snugly in place on his forehead. Lastly, he had a kunai holster on his right leg and wore gloves with metal plates. Similar to Kakashi's. Sasuke and that Dosugai aren't here yet. Hopefully they make it in time for their matches. Especially since the bastard has his match first, mused the blonde Jinchuriki before he was brought back into focus by the voice of Genma Shiranui, the proctor. Look alive, boys and girls, he said to them, almost being unheard by the excitement of the spectators. You all are the stars of this little show, so act like it. None of the participating genin looked amused at the mon's attempted joke. Instead, they stood in line and waited for the start of the finals. It was finally time. Naruto stood beside his fellow participant genin, looking to the viewing crowd to see if he could spot any of his old classmates, the unparticipating members of Team 7, or his housemates. He wasn't gonna bother looking for the toad pervert, having seen him standing beside the old man in the cage booth. Taking a second to observe the other visiting cage, he was shocked to see how massive the Raikage of the Hidden Cloud was. He was like a wall made of human flesh and bulking muscle, wearing nothing to cover his upper torso save for his cloak. The mon's sole escort looked to be related to him, but his muscle mass was nowhere the level of the Raikage. The other cage was the Kase cage of the Hidden Sand. He couldn't see anything about him except for his eyes, and even they were shadowed by his ceremonial hat. The man had two guards at his side, but they were a pair of nondescript Hidden Sand jonin. A mix of gold and black was seen in the corner of his eye, and he turned his gaze to the source. He was pleased to see that Yasaka and Kuroka were both seated in the stands, having hoped that they would come to see him fight. They must be caught his gaze, for Yasaka gave him a beautiful smile to show her support while Kuroka gave an excited grin. He chuckled to himself, knowing that her twin tails would be swaying happily if she wasn't hiding them. He then spotted Kuroko moving down the steps so that she could sit beside the two yokai. She gave him a soft smile and mouthed to him, "Good luck, darling." This made him fight a blush, but it still warmed his heart to see the three of them supporting him. Mentally, he promised not to let them down. Alright then, Genma spoke up, making Naruto focus on him once again. I need everyone but Yugito Ni to clear out of here and wait in the fighter's booth. With that, everyone but the sole Hidden Cloud genin started walking off. Naruto took a moment to look back as he walked, catching her attention. Good luck, Yugito-san, he said to her, hoping to have sounded respectful. He didn't know what it was, but he felt something that connected the two of them together, so he acted on it. She blinked once, slight surprise on her face since she knew her opponent was the blonde Uzumaki's teammate. It wasn't a derogatory statement, either. So, he was being sincere in wishing her luck, but why would he do such a thing? He is like you, kitten, the Nibi spoke up. He holds the Kyubi, but I doubt he realizes that I am sealed into you. All he can feel is that instinctual link that Jinchuriki share between one another. She chuckled softly. It's actually rather sweet that he's acting solely on that instinct. Saying nothing to her tenant, Yugito gave her fellow blonde a nod with a faint smirk. You'll be sure not to send your teammate to the infirmary, Naruto-san, she returned, earning a smirk back from him before he left the battlefield. Up in the cage booth, The Raikage frowned when the first fight was announced. The Uchiha hasn't arrived yet. I'd have disqualified him immediately on sheer principle. I am sure he'll arrive in time. Raikage, the Kazekage spoke up. We've allowed the genin a couple of minutes to take the field before each match. He has time left. Bah. All shinobi should be expected to be well-behaved, disciplined, and punctual. Clearly the Uchiha shows none of those traits. Yo, bro. Don't let your anger flow. I am sure he'll show up for Yugito, rapped Killer B, earning a groan from the Raikage while everyone else sweat dropped at the Jonin's antics. Coughing once to regain his composure, Sarutobi then spoke up. There's still a little over a minute left before he must take the field. If he doesn't make it, he'll be disqualified. I assure you, Raikage, I will not show favoritism to any of my ninja, regardless of their bloodline. HMPH. I'll believe it when I see it, I grumbled. Last call for Sasuke Uchiha to take the field, Genma announced, having kept tabs of the time via pocket watch. 10 more seconds passed and the Jonin pocketed the timekeeping device. Due to not showing up on time, Sasuke Uchiha has been A flurry of leaves interrupted the Leaf Jonin, and he scowled at the sight of Kakashi and Sasuke arriving in an overly dramatic fashion and how most of the Leaf spectators went crazy for his arrival. What nearly set Genma off was how his fellow Jonin had the gall to casually ask aloud, "We're not too late, are we?" The proctor closed his eyes and took a breath before turning his gaze questioningly to the cage booth. His attention was on the Hokage, and he felt some sympathy for how the man looked rightfully embarrassed while the Raikage looked almost livid. If anyone asked Genma, he'd be just as incensed as the hulking man. After a few moments, he saw the Hokage shake his head once, nodding in understanding. Genma announced, "As I was saying, due to not showing up on time, Sasuke Uchiha has been disqualified from the finals." Outrage was heard from a majority of the Hidden Leaf spectators, and the Uchiha himself was seething silently while Kakashi looked genuinely surprised. "Now hang on," he tried to say, but was cut off by the Senbon chewing Jonin. "Get yourself an Uchiha-san off my field, Kakashi," he ordered, paying no mind to an annoyed Yugito walking past them for the fighter's booth. "He's late and the Hokage has made his decision." He then turned to Sasuke and finished with, "Next time, set an alarm." The genin almost lunged at the Mon's taunt but was restrained by Kakashi before he could even move. He settled for glaring furiously at Genma before he left in another flurry of leaves. Kakashi looked to the Hokage, but all he needed to see was the disappointed glare on the older Mon's face to know that they would be speaking later about this embarrassment. So, he just gave a sigh and left in his own body flicker, choosing to simply wait and see how Naruto would fare in his match. Part of him felt guilty for not taking any part in Naruto's training for the month. But Kakashi wanted to go with the easier student. Sasuke was like himself, so he knew how best to train the Uchiha while Naruto, in Kakashi's eyes, needed more work that time allowed. He mentally planned to make it up to the boy after the finals. Kuroko frowned as she saw Guy's little protege fail his initial finisher, and now, the poor kid was too exhausted to dodge properly and was forcing himself to endure the onslaught of sand. "Poor Lee," she heard Kuroka say, having seen her wince a few times as Lee took massive bursts of sand. "Naruto-kun told me about him. He said that Lee has his respect for getting as far as he has, even without the full use of his chakra for ninjutsu or genjutsu." Nodding, Kuroko didn't take her gaze away from the match below. "Knowing Guy," she spoke up, earning the attention of both yokai. "Lee still has more up his sleeves." She smirked when she saw Lee regain the full use of his speed, blurring out of sight and reappearing safely away from Gaara's sand. "In fact, I think we'll be in for quite the show." "Holy shit," Naruto gasped out, seeing Lee open the third of the celestial gates. "The gate of life." He's turning red. "I've heard of this technique," Yugito spoke up, having chosen to stand beside him to watch the match. Some of the Jonin back home spoke of witnessing Might Guy using this same technique. They mentioned something about celestial gates and how he had the strength of a wild beast. "Damn, and Bushy Brow has the same trick up his sleeves." Naruto smiled for his friend, observing how the taijutsu enthusiast was knocking Gaara around like a pinball. "Way to go, Lee." Having seen the smile on his face, Yugito couldn't fight her own small smile. Being a Jinchuriki, she knew that growing up with a biju sealed within you wasn't easy. People either hated you, feared you, or ignored you before only a handful ever come around. Even with B becoming the guardian of the hidden cloud, she knew it would be some time before she earned the amount of respect that her senior had, but seeing that a fellow Jinchuriki had people to call friends made her happy for Naruto. "Ah, is little Yugito thinking about her new little brother?" the Nibi teased. "Oh, shut up Matabi," mentally yelled Yugito. "No need to be embarrassed, kitten. I think it's adorable that you already are looking out for him." She then sighed and added, "A shame that Shukaku messed up his Jinchuriki so much." Yugito winced at that, having seen how morally and emotionally broken Gaara was during the times she saw him throughout the chunin exams. most notably during the preliminaries where he crushed one of the sound genin and ground them to dust with his sand, and all without any hesitation. Reverse Lotus. She and everyone else watched in slight awe as Lee used his ultimate technique on Gaara, plowing against the red-headed genin with both his fist and foot. The blow sent Gaara rocketing to the ground in an almost unseen blur, but those able to keep up with such speed saw that Gaara wasn't down for the count yet. When the dust settled, everyone else was able to see that Lee was on the ground unable to get back up while Gaara had managed to lessen the impact of the lethal blow by cushioning his fall with sand. Sand made by breaking down the gourd that usually would be on his back. That's no way. How could he have withstood that? Naruto exclaimed in total shock. Lee threw everything he had at this guy and he still couldn't take him down, Shikamaru groused, but many of the genin could hear the faintest quiver in his voice. Fate decrees it after all, Neji spoke up, as if confirming to himself and others that the match was over, and Lee had lost. I tried to warn him that you cannot fight fate, but you can't stop the stubbornness of fools. Naruto growled at that, looking ready to jump down there to help his friend. He was stopped when Genma called the end of the match and Guy blurred into the view to help Lee onto a stretcher. Gaara was seen using his sand to pull him back onto his feet before it reformed back into his gourd and he made his way off the field. Match 3 is about to start. Naruto Uzumaki and Temari of the Hidden Sand. Get down here for your match, Genma announced, earning a few stray jeers for Naruto from the crowd. This only made him frown, unable to get over the mistreatment of the son of the late fourth. Not that many people, Naruto included, knew that fact. Temari leapt from the booth and rode her fan during her descent, showing off for the crowd and earning some impressed looks from some of the visiting nobles. Naruto scoffed at the display and turned around to head for the stairs. Good luck, he heard Yugito call out to him, prompting him to turn around and see her smirking. Give everyone a good show, yeah? The blonde Uzumaki grinned at that. Just watch me, he promised before resuming his trek down to the field. When the two blondes stood across from one another, Genma silenced the crowd by raising his arm to the air, ready. Both genin nodded and tensed themselves to move, bringing down his arm. The proctor declared, begin. Using her fan, Temari sent forth a blast of wind that also pushed her back while Naruto did a small hop and braced himself, riding the attack so that he could get some distance as well. As soon as he landed, he whipped out a scroll and unsealed a massive shuriken in a burst of smoke that obscured him from view for a brief moment. Demon Wind Shuriken, he declared, launching the weapon with a strong toss from his arm. Smirking, Temari opened her fan to the first moon and swung it. Once more, wind erupted from the weapon and hit the shuriken, deflecting the large throwing star and making it flip as if it stopped dead against a wall. Nice try. But shuriken are useless against me, she taunted. The still flipping shuriken then burst into smoke and revealed Naruto, who had a spiraling ball of wind enlarging itself in front of him. Temari's eyes widened at how the ball was already the same size as his body, and she gripped her fan tighter as it was launched. Wind style. Spiraling wind ball, fan wind roaring wall. Wind sphere met tornado, both jutsu fighting for dominance while the Naruto that used the jutsu dispelled, showing that it was just a shadow clone while the original that threw the fake shuriken went through more hand seals. Wind style. Great breakthrough, he roared, sending forth gale force winds that pressed into his first jutsu and forced it through the tornado. Shit. Temari cursed, leaping into the air and swinging her fan downward, using the force to propel herself even higher so that she flipped over the barreling sphere of wind. When she landed, she took a glance at the part of the wall Naruto's jutsu hit, and her eyes widened at the sight of multiple cracks and a large indentation seen into the stone structure. That alone showed that, while obviously not as refined as her own wind-style training, Naruto had raw power at his disposal. It was finesse versus force in her eyes, and force won that exchange. Cracking was heard beneath her feet, and it was all the warning she needed to lean back and jump away. It was just in time, for another clone of Naruto erupted from the ground with a rising uppercut that almost grazed her chin. However, while she avoided the uppercut, she couldn't avoid the spiraling windball that Naruto launched from his free hand. The jutsu struck her in the stomach, knocking the air from her lungs and flinging her back. She landed roughly and rolled across the ground while struggling to regain her breath. Despite it all, she still kept grip on her fan and retaliated with another swing. Wind style. Sickle weasel technique. She choked out, sending forth multiple blades of wind that raced toward the Naruto that hit her. When it proved to be another clone, she cursed in between her coughs and turned to the first Naruto, only to see him too dispel. Great breakthrough. She heard from behind her, turning and using her fan as a makeshift shield that helped her brace the wind launched at her. Damn it. He only has 2 jutsu, but he has so much chakra that he can overcharge them to near A-rank power. A shadow grew over her form, prompting her to grasp her fan and roll away from Naruto, landing with a furious punch to the ground, his hand breaking into the earth below and leaving a perfect indent of his fist. He then launched a kunai that had a sealing tag attached to it, and she sent forth another wind fan roaring wall to stop it. She would have used a weaker technique, but she didn't want to take any more chances. Her reasoning proved to be the right choice, for the tag lit up and erupted in dozens of shuriken that launched in all directions. Unfortunately, she wasted her initial swing and didn't have the momentum needed to swing again. This forced her to waste more chakra with the replacement jutsu. Her form switched out with a log while she hit herself in one of the few trees in the arena. From her vantage point, she saw that Naruto had once again faced her with a clone that dispelled as it was pierced by shuriken. Son of a bitch, she gritted out, is he always going to fight with clones? If it ain't broke. A dreadfully familiar voice spoke up behind her, and she turned just in time to catch a heavy punch to the face. The blow knocked her from the trees and she nearly landed next to some stray shuriken on the ground. However, one of them erupted into smoke and revealed Naruto, who had used replacement to switch places with it. Then, in a move that surprised all from the hidden cloud, Naruto caught the falling sand kunoichi with a clothesline. Though it was clumsy and not aimed properly like the lariat since his attack hit her in the stomach. However, Naruto used his raw strength to carry Temari through his incorrect lariat, flipping her over his body and slamming her onto the ground and kicking up enough dust to hide them for a moment. When it cleared, she was sprawled on the ground giving a small moan of pain while Naruto held a kunai to her throat. That's enough. The winner of match 3 is Naruto Uzumaki, Genma declared. Despite him being generally disliked amongst the populace of the Leaf, many people cheered for Naruto's victory over Temari. However, none were louder than a certain black cat. NYA. Way to go. Whisker-kun. Woohoo. Kuroka cheered, earning an amused chuckle from Yasaka as she applauded for her blonde student. Well, he handled that fairly well, I'd say, she commented to Kuroko, who was also clapping for him. What do you think? I say Darling was in control from the first exchange, Smith answered. He rode the wind during the starting move and took command of how the battle flowed, definitely on par with Chunin. Damn right, he is, Kuroka agreed, still excited for her friend. If they don't give Whisker-kun his promotion, Ima scratched somebody's face, NYA. Both older women laughed at that, the two of them wanting to see that happen. Damn, forehead. Where did the idiot get moves like that? Ino questioned Sakura, who looked just as shocked as the blonde. I don't know. I thought Kakashi-sensei was only teaching Sasuke-kun this month, the pinkhead exclaimed. Isn't that unfair to Naruto? Kiba, who was seated next to Hinata, asked. I mean, sure Naruto was the dead last of the class, but wouldn't that prove that he needed the training more than Sasuke? Kiba-kun, that's not right to keep saying such things about Naruto-kun. Hinata gently admonished her teammate, defending her crush. He works hard and earned his place in the finals, and he showed it just now in this match. I am happy for him. While that was true, she was also wondering who was cheering so loudly for him and using such a familiar nickname. Was somebody already closer to Naruto? I think Naruto did a great job in the fight. Shoji, who was enjoying some chips, spoke up. I mean, it looked like he had answers for everything that Temari girl threw at him, and that finishing move would need a lot of strength to pull off. Whoever he trained with knew what they were doing. Next to him, Tenten hummed thoughtfully. What I am curious about was that seal he used. I've used similar seals in my arsenal, but I usually have my dad help me make them. The one Naruto used was pretty crude, almost like he made it himself. Isn't sealing supposed to be really difficult to learn? What makes you think that Naruto of all people would make his own seal? Kiba asked, ignoring the admonishing look from Hinata. Did nobody tell you rookies about the Uzumaki clan in the academy? The older genin asked, earning confused looks from the others. Wait, seriously? Not one of you knows that Naruto's last name is a clan name? A few of them looked away in embarrassment while Kiba and Ino both looked disbelieving. You guys really are hopeless, Tenten shot down, looking annoyed at their lack of knowledge. The Uzumaki clan are a cousin of the Senju clan, who helped found the Hidden Leaf with the Uchiha. They had their own island nation that was wiped out during the Second Shinobi War, leaving only a few scattered survivors. Naruto may be the only Uzumaki in the Hidden Leaf, but Lady Tsunade's grandmother was Mito Uzumaki, who was the wife of the first Hokage. That earned her some surprised looks from the younger genin, as well as a few eavesdroppers. Not to mention that there was another Uzumaki who died the night the Kyuubi attacked. I don't know what her real name was, but she was known as the Red Death. She was the only other known Uzumaki before. She slowly trailed off, looking to be lost in thought. The others wondered what she was going to say and Kiba almost asked before Tenten was seen with a look of shocked realization. Holy shit, she gasped out, ignoring them. Tenten said nothing and didn't pay attention to Kiba trying to ask her something in favor of looking to Naruto interacting with Yugito in the fighter's booth. She didn't even pay attention to Neji being declared the winner of his match by forfeit due to Dosu Kinuda of the Hidden Sound not showing up. It all makes sense. The Red Death was the only Uzumaki in the village before Naruto. and Naruto was born on the night the Kyuubi attacked, not brought in as a refugee. The Red Death is Naruto's mother. That also means that Naruto is a cousin of Lady Tsunade. This revelation was such a shock that Tenten was finally broken from it when everyone heard a certain puppeteer yelling out, "Proctor, I forfeit." As Naruto was declared the winner, Sarutobi and Jiraiya both smiled proudly at his success while I looked slightly intrigued. Uzumaki, eh. The casual tone captured the Hokage's attention, and he regarded the Raikage with an expression that betrayed nothing. "Something on your mind, Raikage?" Just interested in the boy, Hokage, while not the correct execution, he still performed an impressive rendition of my lariat. Plus, he spotted Yugito speaking with the Uzumaki amicably in their booth. I am surprised that he was able to best an aspiring fan maiden with her own element. What do you think, Cage? The veiled Cage was silent for a moment, eyes closed in thought. I believe that Temari will need more training. She was obviously ill-prepared for someone who uses jutsu with brute force. Those techniques Uzumaki used are lower tier. But the raw power he put in them gave them enough strength to match some higher tier ones. If you are asking on my opinion for his promotion, I say he's earned it. Sarutobi nodded with a thankful smile. I appreciate your words on behalf of my genin, and I am sure your daughter will make a fine chunin as well, despite her loss today. Due to Dosu Kinuda not arriving on time, he is disqualified, and the victor is Neji Hyuga. The three leaders heard Genma call out. Another no-show, grumbled I, sounding both bored and annoyed. Genin these days are so disrespectful of other people's time. I admit that I haven't seen any of the hidden sound genin or their jonin instructor around since the end of the preliminaries. Sarutobi spoke up, while not the best choice from a reputable view, perhaps knowing that at least one of their genin made it this far was enough in their eyes. A freshly founded village with a genin in the finals. I'd be rather pleased if I were in their position. Possibly, the Cage said shortly before another announcement was called. Proctor, I forfeit. Kankuro was heard declaring aloud, earning a negative response from the spectators. I didn't realize your son was such a coward, Cage, I taunted, earning a groaning sigh from the man. Idiot boy, making a fool of our village like this, there will be words spoken later. Well, since Shino wins by forfeit, that means he'll be in top form for his match against Shikamaru, the Hokage noted. Assuming that Nara laziness doesn't kick in and he forfeits as well, the Raikage shot down in amusement, having dealt with some of the Nara as a younger man, brilliant in mind, but they could be some truly lazy fuckers. Let's hope he doesn't. I didn't come all this way to see so many forfeits and disqualifications, the Cage groused. Wait, seriously? You're just gonna forfeit like that? Yugito asked aloud to Kankuro, are you afraid or just stupid? The puppeteer furrowed his brows angrily at that, but he said nothing in response to her taunts. He didn't have to answer to some cloud bitch. Not when his forfeit would only help things in the long run. Shino, while annoyed at not being able to fight Kankuro, still turned in preparation to head down. However, he stopped and turned to Shikamaru. If you are going to forfeit as well, speak now. Why? It will save me the trip down the stairs. Shikamaru scoffed and honestly considered doing just that. However, he then thought of everyone who would gripe at him for forfeiting. His opponent included. Most of their fellow graduates didn't know this, but Shino could hold one hell of a grudge. Troublesome, fine, I'll head down with you, he grumbled, turning around and walking off with Shino. His clan must be so proud, Yugito deadpanned, earning an awkward chuckle from Naruto. I think he was more worried about dealing with other people getting on his case for quitting before the match even starts. At least down there, he could put in some effort and then forfeit. He wouldn't really do that, would he? She asked after a pause. Naruto only chuckled in response, saying nothing. The match had been pretty even at the start. Shikamaru was lazy, but that didn't mean he couldn't be quick on his feet and come up with plans in tight spots. He had made excellent use of flashbangs to stun Shino and his bugs, who weren't fans of the blinding light and the deafening sound. Shino responded to this by having some of his beetles cover his ears like muffs while his shades provided some decent protection from the blinding flash. Still, he couldn't take advantage of that due to Shikamaru using the sudden burst of light to dramatically extend the reach of his shadow. In short, both were in a sort of deadlock that would soon become a battle of attrition in some sense. Either Shikamaru would run out of flash bangs, or Shino's beetles would become too hampered by them or head be caught by Shikamaru's shadow. Hiding behind one of the trees, Shikamaru used his recently thrown flashbang to buy him some time to think of a better strategy. He wasn't like Naruto who could come up with impressive plans on the fly. He needed time to think. That was a troublesome downside of how his brain worked, in his opinion. Knowing he didn't have much time, he decided to go for broke and grabbed the last 3 of his flashbangs. Lighting the fuses, he tossed them in the air followed by 2 handfuls of shuriken before he flowed through hand seals he had learned this month. The triple flashes of light and bursts of sound almost disoriented the lazy genius, but he knew that Shino's beetles would take them much worse. Squinting his eyes, he saw that Shino was able to evade his shuriken and move to the side, to a position he could work with. Shadow Formation Jutsu. The Nara declared, splitting his shadow into multiple branches that reached out and latched onto the shadows of his surroundings before pulling them all toward himself. He then formed more familiar hand seals and called out, Shadow Possession Jutsu. With the assimilated shadows strengthening his own, Shikamaru was able to have his controlled shadow race across the lit-up ground and ensnare Shino. When the light of his final flashbangs died down, that same shadow thinned to almost nothing and regained some width as both genin walked towards one another, with one of them forcibly being made to now standing arms reach apart. Shikamaru raised his arm and forced Shino to do the same. The crowd waited with bated breath at what would happen, but a few people already knew what the result would be. That's it, the Nara called out, I give up. Silence was the master of the spectators, nobody saying a thing before the sound of Kuroka laughing broke the silence. He went through all that, and he gave up in the end. Bawahahaha. The Nekomata called out in her seat, struggling to talk through her laughter. Naruto chuckled from his position, having figured this would happen and happy to see that Kuroka was enjoying herself. Even Yasaka, despite showing some annoyance, looked amused at the outcome, and Kuroko was sitting casually in her own seat, enjoying some coffee in a small paper cup. He would need to have her cut back one of these days. The winner by forfeit is Shino Aburame, Genma declared to the crowd, who was a mix of jeering for Shikamaru and cheering for Shino. We will take a half-hour break before moving on to the second round of the tournament. Heard over the cheering and jeering was a certain mother promising some punishment on her lazy, do-nothing of a son. Troublesome. After the match between Shikamaru and Shino had finished, it was announced that there would be a short break before the start of the second round. Naruto used this time to head over to where his friends, housemates were sitting in the stands. As he approached them, he centered himself just in time to catch Kuroka as she flew at him and hugged him close. Nya. Whisker-kun was amazing down there. Blushing in embarrassment at her exclamation and public display of affection, Naruto could only chuckle awkwardly as he patted her on the back. Thanks, Kuro-chan. The Nekosho pulled away from the Uzumaki and hid her blush at the nickname he gave her while Yasaka and Kuroko gave him proud smiles. You performed marvelously, Naruto-kun, Yasaka praised. You really took my training and made it your own down there. Some of your maneuvers still surprise me. Really? What could have surprised you, Yasaka-sensei? Well, I was unaware that your clones could perform jutsu while under your transformation technique. It caught plenty of attention from the spectators. She's right, darling, Kuroko continued. Some of the visiting lords looked impressed at your match and how you handled another wind user. On top of that, your opponent was an up-and-coming fan maiden from the Hidden Sand, who are known for their mastery of wind-style combat. He blushed once more at the praise. I didn't know that, and when I had my clone posing as a shuriken, I took a gamble and had it prepare a spiraling wind ball to catch her off guard. I didn't know if it would work, and I had a backup plan in case it didn't. Always thinking on your feet, don't ever change, darling, Kuroko told him with a gentle smile. I won't, he promised, grinning back at her. Yasaka smirked to herself at the visibly close bond the two humans before her had. While the age gap would be a problem for normal human societies, she doubted this place would kick up much fuss over it, not to mention that she herself was older than the Uzumaki, but she still felt a growing desire for him. And based on how her fellow yokai acted around him, it was obvious that Kuroka desired him as well. Any advice for my next match? Naruto asked. I don't think anything we say will be much help, the female Jonin answered. There was an odd number of winners of the first round, based on how something similar happened the last time the finals were hosted here in the Leaf. I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to randomize the matches again while giving a pass to the odd one out. Naruto hummed thoughtfully at that. So, one of us will get to watch the fights and rest, leaving the others tired from their previous fights. Exactly, don't weigh yourself down with unneeded stress, Naruto-kun, Yasaka advised. It won't do you any good, just take this time to relax your mind and rest your body. He nodded in understanding. Yes, sensei, I need all the winning genin from round 1 to come back down, Genma announced. That's my cue, wish me luck, Naruto bid before leaving. The three women got comfortable in their seats, waiting patiently for the next round of matches to commence. Alright, just like the end of the preliminaries, you 5 are going to draw a number. If the ticket you draw has a star symbol, you get to fight the winner of the first match of round 2, Genma explained before motioning for the genin to draw their tickets. When they each were drawn and revealed, the bracket for the remainder of the finals was made. The first match would be Neji against Shino. The winner of that match would then face Yugito, who had drawn the star-marked ticket. After that match, Naruto was set to face Gaara, with the winner going to the final match against the victor of Yugito's match. Alright, everyone but Neji Hyuga and Shino Aburame leave the field. The three Jinchuriki genin followed the order and returned to the competitor's booth to spectate the match. The crowd was silent as they awaited Genma to start the match, and the only sound generating from the field was the faintest sound of buzzing from Shino's chakra beetles. You both ready? The Jonin asked both genin. Yes, Genma-san, Shino replied respectfully. Let's get this over with, Neji said dismissively. Genma raised his arm, held it up for a few moments, and then brought it down swiftly with a shout of, begin. As soon as the Jonin announced the start of the match, he leapt back a few feet, and it was just in time, for both genin leapt away from one another while covering their jumps with thrown shuriken. The metal stars clashed in the center with only a couple getting by for each side. Neji easily sidestepped away from the shuriken reaching him while Shino deflected his with a kunai. With the opening moves done, both stood across from one another and sized up their opponent. Neji crossed his arms while Shino had his hands in the pockets of his jacket. Give up, Neji ordered confidently, like what happened to Lady Hinata, your destiny is to lose today. Shino's brows furrowed faintly, but to many it would have been waved off as a twitch. Your clan may have eyes that can penetrate through nearly anything, but they cannot penetrate through the being each person has. You cannot see destiny or fate. Hyuga-san, claiming you can shows arrogance. Why? Because it is illogical and impossible to see another's destiny. Spoken like a fool who tries to escape their fate with futility, shot back the Hyuga prodigy. Destiny is set for every man, woman, and child from the moment they are conceived. It is inescapable. And you say this because, the Aburame heir pressed, secretly having his beetles burrow through the ground while Neji's Byakugan remained inactive. Such arrogance. I don't need to explain myself to a fool who denies his fate. Naruto, who had heard such talk used against Hinata before her brutal loss, glared down at the Hyuga prodigy. He was sick and tired of hearing him talk like a broken record about fate and destiny. Kick his ass, Shino. He yelled to his fellow graduate, making Yugito jump slightly in surprise. Hinata's your teammate, right? Don't let this asshole get away with what he did to her. Shino's eyes, behind his dark glasses, moved to Naruto for a split second before returning to Neji while the Hyuga frowned at the Uzumaki's words, but said nothing. You refuse to explain, but that shows a weakness on your part. How do you expect to get your point across if don't support it, Hyuga-san? Shino questioned before he went through some hand seals, deliberately making them visible. Neji responded by rushing towards the bug user, activating his bloodline to anticipate what Shino was doing as he charged in. With his eyes, he saw Shino gathering a moderate amount of chakra into his lungs while the energy itself started to become corrosive in nature. I won't get to him in time, the Hyuga thought as he threw some kunai in hopes of disrupting the incoming jutsu. Shino finished his seals and ducked beneath the thrown weaponry before lowering the collar of his jacket enough for him to use his jutsu. Ninja art. Poison fog, he declared as he expelled a dark purple miasma from his mouth. The poisonous cloud spread quickly and began to expand outwards from ground zero, being Shino's body. Neji stopped his run and grit his teeth at the quickly approaching fog. Because it was a chakra-based cloud, it also hid Shino from his eyes within its density. He began to backpedal away from the jutsu, stopping when the rolling miasma halted its advance. Doing a quick measurement of the arena with his eyes, he saw that the total open space was around a fifth of the space that comprised the battlefield. I can't get too close or else I'll breathe in the poison, but I have no means of attacking from a distance except for shuriken and kunai, he mused before tensing and leaping backward, avoiding a hand that burst out from the ground and attempted to grab him. The hand continued to break from the ground, revealing Shino, who pulled himself back to his feet. I'd compliment your evasion, he began, sounding almost taunting, but I believe it would be a wasted effort in your eyes, or did you already know I was going to take back my compliment? Was I destined to deny you due praise, Hyuga-san? Neji growled at the insult, but it changed to a smirk since Shino was now within taijutsu range. He was fast enough to get within the Aburame's guard and block some of his chakra points before going in for the finish. With his plan set, he used chakra to strengthen his legs and rush Shino. He easily got within striking distance and began to barrage the Aburame with gentle fist strikes aimed at his chakra network. After he hit a couple dozen, he finished his assault with a powerful palm thrust to the torso that sent the bug-using genin to the ground. Unable to defend, Shino went down and was left on his back as Neji smirked down at him and deactivated his eyes with confidence. Sorry, but this is reality, he declared condescendingly. I tried to warn you, but only the blind fail to see what their destiny is, and yours was to lose to me. Up in the stands, Hinata and Kiba both looked worried for their teammate, but Kurenai, who was sitting next to her fellow Jonin sensei, kept a cool expression. She knew that Shino was a great tactician for a genin, almost as good as Shikamaru was, so, she didn't believe he would be taken down that easily. And she was proven correct when Shino dissolved into countless bugs that immediately returned to the ground, leaving behind their deceased comrades that Neji had struck. What? The Hyuga cried in surprise before he heard movement and turned just in time to get slugged in the jaw by a brutal right hook from Shino. The hit stunned Neji, making him stumble and open for Shino to add in a lunging kick that struck him in the stomach and sent him to the ground. The Aburame looked down at Neji as he shakily stood up, fixing his glasses before speaking. I am afraid I am confused, Hyuga-san, didn't fate tell you I'd use a bug clone? Wasn't it destined that you'd see through my deception with your eyes and counter my plan? Neji sneered at him, holding his chest while his Byakugan reactivated. You dare mock me? Do you think this means you've won? Perhaps I should enlighten you as to why I believe in destiny so much. I'd rather not listen to any further nonsense from you, Hyuga-san. Shino cut off as the ground erupted with pillars of rising beetles in various locations. I have no desire to hear your reasons. This all narrows down to a simple thing. You maliciously harmed my teammate, tearing her down with your words and nearly killing her in your misplaced rage. My actions today will serve as reparation for yours. Byakugan eyes widened in shock at the hundreds of thousands of beetles that quickly covered the battleground save for a small circle that surrounded him. How did you supposedly have all-seeing eyes? Yes. Figure it out. Hidden jutsu. Insect bog, he declared as the bugs formed multiple large waves that rose into the air and fell forward to crash into the Hyuga. 8 trigrams. Palm rotation. Neji cried, spinning in place and erecting a dome of rapidly churning chakra that took the waves of insects and killed them upon impact. However, there were more waves of beetles than he could withstand his defense against, and slowly he lost momentum with his rotation before getting swept up in the last wave. Sent crashing into the wall, he groaned in pain at his injuries, depleted chakra, and exhaustion as he barely managed to stay conscious enough to see Shino walking up to him. He couldn't even struggle to his feet, only managing to find enough strength to glare at his opponent. It seems that it was your destiny to lose today, Hyuga-san. Some advice for the future. Don't misplace your anger. You may find that your chosen target isn't as weak as you first believed. After all, if she truly wished to, Hinata could have ended the fight with a single hand seal. Neji flinched at that, knowing it was true and banking on Hinata's gentle nature keeping her from activating the curse seal on his forehead. That gentleness was viewed as a weakness by many of the main branch, and he had believed the same thing. But, maybe it only masked an inner strength that not even the Byakugan could have seen, he mused, remembering how she refused to run or quit, only losing when he struck the final blow that could have killed her. She had fought to her almost literal last breath, and all to prove herself to him, the person who held misplaced anger for her. As he finally lost consciousness, Neji vowed to himself to speak with Hinata when he had the chance. He had much to apologize for, and much to learn. Naruto had a small smile on his face when he witnessed Shino's victory. While he wished to have been the one to take down the arrogant Hyuga, he knew that Shino had more right to do the deed. Hinata was his teammate, and she had been torn down both emotionally and physically while being unable to do a thing about it, until this match, that is. Way to go, Shino, the Uzumaki murmured. You really had it out for the Hyuga, didn't you? Yugito asked. Yeah, he kept talking about how we're slaves to fate and how someone labeled as a failure will never be anything more than that. I was always the one who failed and struggled, but I never gave up. So, hearing him immediately say that my efforts, as well as Hinata's, were meaningless really got under my skin. Not to mention how hard it is being a Jinchuriki, she added softly, making him look to her in surprise, giving him an understanding smile. She silently held up 2 fingers and saw the look of realization on his face. Does it ever get easier? He asked back almost in a whisper. Her hand gently rested on his shoulder and squeezed supportively. With the right people in your corner, it can. He gave her a grateful smile at her words before they both heard Genma call for her to come down for her match. Good luck, he bid. She nodded back to him before leaping over the railing and landing with feline grace. Walking towards the Jonin, she stood across from her opponent and eyed how he looked notably tired from his previous bout. Despite that, he didn't look ready to quit, which earned him her respect. Ready? Genma asked. Yep, she replied with a nod. I am prepared, the Aburame answered. Then, begin, the Jonin announced before clearing the area just in time to avoid a blue fireball from Yugito. Fire style. Mouse hairball. She cried before spitting the flames, which took the shape of a black mouse surrounded by blue fire. Shino dove and rolled away from the jutsu before letting out his poison fog in retaliation, but she vanished in a blur of speed before nailing him with an elbow strike that cracked a rib and sent him sprawling. Not to sound arrogant, but you should really give up, Aburame-san, she advised. You're still tired from your last match, and my flames will kill whatever beetles you send to me. He groaned softly as he struggled to his feet. In his mind, he went over his previous performances and how his current opponent clearly outclassed him in speed, With a nod of acceptance, he turned to Genma while placing a hand gently against his damaged chest. Proctor-san, I withdraw from my match. I am not in the best condition to continue, and my opponent has me outmatched. The Jonin gave him a nod of both understanding and respect. He knew that Shino performed more than well enough to earn his promotion. Plus, a chunin needed to have the know-how for when to continue and when to cut their losses. Raising a hand toward the hidden cloud Kunoichi, he announced, winner by forfeit, and moving on to the final match, Yugito ni. Plenty of people in the stands cheered for her victory while a few were put off by the short match. Even if Shino's forfeit made sense, still, they clapped respectfully for both genin. Approaching her opponent, Yugito offered him her hand to shake. Maybe someday we can have a proper rematch. He took her hand and shook it while nodding once. Perhaps, I will need to be more prepared before that day comes. She smirked at him challengingly, looking forward to it. She bid before heading back to the booth while the Aburame left for the infirmary. Match 3 will start now, Genma announced. Gaara of the Hidden Sand and Naruto Uzumaki of the Hidden Leaf, come down for your fight. Both genin turned and headed down via the stairs. Along the way, Naruto regarded his fellow Jinchuriki with an awkward expression. The face he was making slightly irritated the red-headed genin. What? He questioned in a slightly raspy voice. I just wanted to say good luck in our fight. I am not planning on holding back against you, the blonde replied. Gaara simply stared at him with a blank expression as they continued descending to the arena floor. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, they saw that Yugito was waiting for them. Give them a good show, boys, she encouraged. I want the finals to be a match worth remembering. Naruto gave her a determined nod while Gaara said nothing and just continued walking out onto the field, sharing a smirk with her. Naruto followed his opponent while Yugito ascended to the viewing booth. This will be interesting, I commented. Both of them practically dominated their first matches, and the winner between them will be facing Yugito. Gaara cannot lose, Rasa spoke confidently. Quite a few of my jonin have trouble against him, and his defense is nigh impenetrable. That doesn't mean it's absolute, though. Hiruzen warned his fellow Kage. After all, one of my genin already broke through it in the previous match, and if there's one thing I would say anyone should remember concerning Naruto, it's that he's the Hidden Leaf Village's #1 hyperactive, knucklehead ninja. Killer Bee chuckled at the title and rapped, free as the wind, Uzumaki be fighting. But Gaara's sand is rough and biting. Yeah. I groaned at his brother's antics. B, shut up. Jiraiya simply shook his head in amusement before focusing on the match about to start. Show them what you've got, kid. I was worried that Naruto would be facing that boy, Yasaka muttered. I can feel the unhinged bloodlust from here. A little birdie told me that he's the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi. Kuroko replied in a low tone. Darling will have his work cut out for him. Kuroka bit her lip nervously. You better win, Whisker-kun. Are the two of you ready? Genma asked with his hand raised, silencing the crowd. Ready as I'll ever be, Naruto replied. Start the match already. Mother is getting restless, Gaara growled out. Mentally wishing the Uzumaki luck, the jonin yelled out, begin. Naruto kicked things off by flying through hand seals and releasing an overcharged great breakthrough that blasted a wave of pressurized wind. The jutsu crashed into Gaara's automatic defense, cracking the hardened wall of sand, but also blocking him from Gaara's sight. Quickly reaching into his bag, Naruto pulled out all 4 of his smoke bombs and threw them on the ground, obscuring a large portion of the arena in smoke. Taking a breath to calm his nerves, Naruto summoned 8 clones and had 3 of them ready spiraling wind balls while the remaining 5 headed towards Gaara under the cover of smoke. As for the real Naruto, he took this time to center himself. Despite the training under Yasaka and the spars against Kuroka, he still had some trouble harnessing and controlling Tuki. He clapped his palms together and focused, slowly enshrouding his form in an outline of glowing orange energy. As Naruto gathered energy, 4 of the 5 clones rushed Gaara from all sides with kunai at the ready while the last attempted to distract him with a volley of shuriken. He wasn't surprised that, even with the shuriken flying at him from behind, Gaara's sand caught them without him moving a muscle. The sand poured out of his gourd just in time to come alive and pierce 3 of the charging clones while the last managed to swerve around the tendril of hardened minerals and move into Gaara's guard. Taking a swing, he attempted to slice into the sand armor that Gaara could be wearing, but that same armor coalesced to a spot directly in front of the clone and pierced it with a sharpened sand spike. The remaining clone moved to a better position and used what chakra it had to create another clone directly across from it so that both faced Gaara from the flanks. Both clones then used the last of their shared energy to substitute with the clones in the back, who appeared in twin bursts of smoke with spiraling wind balls that had enlarged to nearly twice their size. With a dual battle cry, the clones unleashed their jutsu and fired the spheres of wind at the hidden sand genin from both sides. The boy's automatic defense sprang up to catch the jutsu, but they were too large to fully absorb. Especially with his sand having to split in half, The sand barely managed to hold the twin jutsu back, but this left Gaara open in the front and back. This was something Naruto took advantage of, blurring into Gaara's guard while surrounded in Tuki. Green eyes widened in shock as an orange-shrouded fist hurtled toward him, landing a clean hit against his cheek and sending him flying into the arena wall just as the two wind jutsu finally dispersed. Gaara's sand, sensing that he had been knocked back, flew towards him and helped steady him back to his feet. His sand armor had been broken by the punch and a bruise was already starting to form on his cheek. His jaw had been rattled by the blow, and he felt dazed by the raw power Naruto unleashed upon him. As for the blonde Uzumaki, he was seen standing in a basic stance while covered in his Tuki energy, staring down Gaara while unaware of the mixture of shock and surprise seen on the faces of the spectators. Those who knew of his status were wondering if he was tapping into the chakra of the Kyuubi, while those who were unaware wondered what sort of technique he was using. That energy shroud, I murmured, it's too streamlined to be like a Bijuu's chakra cloak. Killer Bee noted how the Hokage barely flinched at his brother's comment. Yo, Edo. Whatcha thinking, bro? I am thinking that the Uzumaki kid down there is the host of my elder sibling, the Hachibi replied, but that's only because I can sense his energy within the kid. As for the power he's using, I can say that it's not a Biju cloak, it's something similar, yet different. Mentally nodding to his partner, the man chose to clear the tension by rapping out, the Uzumaki is bringing the pain. Punches hitting harder than a train, Sandboy better watch out, or else Uzumaki will win this bout. Aw, yeah. Rasa said nothing and just narrowed his eyes on the match below while his masked guard kept a very close watch on the match. They already knew of both genin being Jinchuriki, but they knew that the Uzumaki wasn't using the power of his Biju. The power was too tame to be that of the Kyuubi. What are you thinking, Jiraiya? The Hokage quietly asked his old student. I am thinking that the kid learned a few interesting tricks from Yasaka over this past month, the Toad Sage replied. Gaara warily stared down his opponent, seeing that he wasn't dropping his stance and covered in an energy he had never seen before. However, it managed to make the Uzumaki faster as well as strong enough to break past his armor and still deal noticeable damage. He could still feel the sting from the punch to his cheek. Deciding to test this strange power, Gaara had his sand race toward the Uzumaki. He watched as Naruto tensed before charging in, making his brows furrow at the straightforward assault before he had his sand enlarge itself from a tendril to a large wave. However, he was caught by surprise when Naruto literally punched a hole through the wave that he dove through, landing with a roll before resuming his charge. This worried Gaara, and he clapped his hands together as his sand burrowed into the ground and broke it apart enough to summon forth a massive wave. Sand tsunami, he declared before unleashing the wave upon the whiskered blonde. The audience was left awestruck at the colossal wave that crashed down upon Naruto, many of them crying out in shock at him being engulfed and buried beneath the grains. Their shock turned to horror when Gaara placed his hands upon the sand-covered floor and surged his chakra through it. Giant sand burial. A tremor was felt throughout the stadium as the chakra from Gaara echoed like a shockwave, flattening and grinding the sand as it traveled from his hands to the other end of the arena. Nobody said a word, the arena going silent as a grave as many spectators were terrified that they had just witnessed the death of an aspiring genin. Gaara let out an exhausted breath and stood up, ready to tell the proctor that his opponent was no more. However, the sound of earth cracking caught his attention, and he looked down just in time to catch a rising uppercut that hit him with an ungodly amount of force. The blow carried Gaara into the air, with Naruto following him after breaking free from the ground he had burrowed beneath. Opening his fist, he gripped Gaara around the throat before shifting his body in midair so that they both plummeted back to the ground below. Gaara, too rattled from the initial uppercut, couldn't find the strength to break Naruto's grip as he was choke-slammed with tremendous force thanks to Naruto's use of Tuki augmenting his strength. A massive dust cloud formed upon impact, obscuring everyone's vision for a few moments. When the dust settled, Naruto was seen standing above a downed Gaara while breathing heavily. Gaara himself was groaning weakly, struggling to move so that he could try and get back on his feet. Just as Genma was about to go down and declare Naruto's victory, feathers began to descend upon the audience. The ninja in the stands recognized the feeling of a large-scale genjutsu, and they countered its effects with a pulse of their chakra just in time to defend themselves from the hidden sand and disguised ninja from the hidden sound. The stands erupted in a clash of ninja, with the Hidden Leaf's forces pushed on two fronts as they tried to defend both themselves and the innocent, incapacitated. In the cage booth, Rasa's guard blurred behind the Hokage and held a kunai to his throat before forcing them both to leap on top of the roof of the arena. Jiraiya leapt after them, followed by Rasa himself, while I and B were forced to defend themselves against two men dressed in black cloaks with red clouds adorning them. With Naruto's housemates, Yasaka tore into a sound ninja with her claws before sending a burst of foxfire at another, setting him aflame and screaming in agony. Kuroka, bringing out her yokai features, gathered a minuscule amount of senjutsu and leapt at some sand ninja with an enraged hiss. Kuroko went through hand seals and erected a barrier around a group of incapacitated civilians before pulling out a strange weapon that had visible seals on it. The weapon looked like a metal pipe welded to a handle that had wood around the grip. Seals were engraved into the pipe and lit up as Kuroko fired a condensed shot of pure chakra into a sound ninja. The shot tore into them, blowing a small hole through their chest and making them choke on their blood before falling over dead. With narrowed eyes, she took aim once more while mentally hoping that her knucklehead was handling himself. Spiraling windball. Naruto cried before Yugito joined in. Mouse hairball. She called out, merging her fire jutsu with his wind one and turning them into a massive fireball that crashed into a group of sand ninja. That Gaara kid was taken by his teammates and their sensei. They were heading for the western forests. We're a little busy dealing with an invasion force, TT Ibeo. He yelled back incredulously. I know that. But Gaara is like us. Not to mention he's unstable and I doubt your village wants to deal with an unleashed Biju on their doorstep. Then you two go after them. Genma ordered as he landed beside them and deflected some shuriken aimed at Yugito's back. Naruto, this is a direct order from your superior officer. Go after the Sand Genin and stop them from releasing the Ichibi upon the leaf. Naruto nodded before taking off. Yugito turned to Genma, ready to tell him her plan, but he cut her off with a knowing look and a grateful nod. Keep an eye on him, he's more important than even he realizes. Curious about the Mon's words, Yugito forced them to the back of her mind before taking off after her fellow blonde. As she followed his trail, she was joined by a black blur that revealed themselves to be a black-haired girl with feline features. I am going too. NYA, I am not letting Whisker-kun fight alone, Kuroka declared. Huh, and here I thought that I was the only two-tailed cat in the elemental nations, Matabi mused. We can ask her and Naruto about it later, we need to hurry and prepare for a fight, Yugito replied before picking up the pace. I knew you were here in the village when Sasuke was shown to have your curse mark, Hiruzen spoke up to his traitorous student Orochimaru, but you, Rasa. The Kazekage looked indifferent at the accusing glare aimed at him. I thought our villages were allies, yet here you are working with one of my village's greatest traitors. I do what I must for my village, Hokage, our so-called alliance is only for your village's benefit while mine is bled dry. Even our daimyo favors your ninja over our own, if destroying your village means that mine can survive, then I will proudly do so as the Kazekage of the hidden sand. Both Hiruzen and Jiraiya frowned at that, understanding where Rasa was coming from in his actions. If the hidden leaf were in his village's position, they would be desperate for a way out too. We could have talked and deliberated peacefully, Rasa, there's no need for all this conflict and death, the Hokage tried to plead, but Rasa shook his head firmly. The time for talk has long passed, Hokage, not that I am not enjoying this moment, Orochimaru spoke up with a taunting smirk, but I felt you and Jiraiya should know that I also acquired the aid of some old associates of mine, associates that you've been looking into, I believe, isn't that right, Jiraiya? The Toad Sage took a glance at the two men battling the AB combo, spotting the red clouds on their cloaks, he cursed under his breath while Orochimaru chuckled cruelly. They couldn't pass up the opportunity to capture some of the Jinchuriki and having three of them within reach was too tempting to ignore. I managed to convince them to ignore the Kazecage's son for now. But you would do well to know that there is a group of ninja that will be coming for him. Rasa said nothing and gathered his gold dust while Hiruzen discarded his cloak and revealed the battle armor he wore beneath. Jiraiya got into a ready stance while Orochimaru held his hands in a seal. Their battle was about to begin. Fool. Ya fool. You can't hurt me with such a stupid tool. B rapped as he easily held back the Akatsuki member with his unorthodox sword style. Stupid. You fucking asshole. I'll enjoy carving you up for Lord Jashin after we extract your Biju? Yelled back Hidan, once a member of the hidden village of Hot Water and now loyal cultist of the god of death, Jashin. You think you are carving, but you are really just starving. Shut up. Kakazu, a missing ninja of the hidden waterfall village, chuckled at how easily his partner was getting riled up by the Hachibi Jinchuriki. That didn't mean he dropped his guard as he faced off against the Raikage, deemed the fastest man alive with the passing of the yellow flash of the leaf. Your brother is an interesting bounty, Raikage, he commented calmly. I'll enjoy seeing how much I can make from his corpse, after we take the Hachibi from him, of course. HMPH. You think I'll let that happen? More importantly, you think your partner can really match B in a fight? I asked back rhetorically as he activated his lightning armor, not in this lifetime. With a furious roar, he vanished from sight and Kakazu was only able to avoid the attack thanks to his many years of living and honing his instincts. After all, he survived a fight against the first Hokage, and he had a couple hearts to spare. He could always replace any lost hearts with some from the village. Having caught up to Naruto, Yugito and Kuroka used this time to form a plan of attack with him. After some time deliberating, it was decided that Kuroko would face Temari and Kankuro. Yugito would handle their Jonin-sensei, and Naruto would take care of Gaara. While worried that he was giving the girls harder opponents, they assured him that they could handle it. Kuroka tensed as they neared their targets, were nearly on top of them, Whisker-kun. Right, he muttered, mentally prepping himself for a tough fight. Breaking through some foliage, Yugito called upon her Biju's chakra and bull rushed the Jonin, tackling him away from the others before kicking off him with sharpened claws at the ready. Kuroka kept Kankuro from interfering by unleashing a spinning wheel of black fire that forced him to leap back. As for Naruto, he used the great breakthrough to push Temari away from Gaara before distracting her with a couple clones while he faced down his fellow Jinchuriki. "I won't let you unleash the Ichibi on my home," he declared while Gaara got to his feet. "Uzumaki," he groaned out, sounding tired before raising his head to glare at him. "Uzumaki," he repeated in rage as the sand from his gourd started to cover his torso, making him resemble a half-man, half-beast made of sand. "Uzumaki." With that final road, he leapt at Naruto, who gathered his Tuki once more. Temari grunted as she was pushed back toward her brother by the last of Naruto's clones. She managed to dispel it in retaliation, but that still meant that the real Uzumaki was now facing her youngest brother. "Gaara can handle himself," Kankuro told her, sending his puppet after the odd cat girl who was just too quick for him to track. "This girl is good, and I can't let Crow get too close since she has fire techniques." "I won't be much use against those," she replied, opening her fan and unleashing a wide-scale wave of wind that tore through the foliage, hoping to flush out their opponent. "Where are you two looking, Nya?" Kuroka asked from above them, making them look up in shock before leaping away from another fire wheel. When she landed, she gathered demonic power to her fingertips and started forming runes in the air before her, the runes having a bright purple glow as she wrote them. "Try not to die too quickly, Nya," she called out as a sudden wave of dark violet mist formed and rushed toward them. Temari responded with another wave of her fan, hoping to push the mist back at their creator, but they hit an invisible barrier before spreading along its edges. To her horror, the barrier encompassed a circular space, and she and her brother were trapped within its borders with a dark mist about to ensnare them. "Kankuro, toss out any explosives you have on you," she ordered, pulling out her own explosive tags before the two of them threw them at the mist in hopes of dispersing it. With consecutive blasts, the poisonous mist detonated and smoke replaced it as it obscured Kuroka from their sight. They both were tense as they waited for her to appear, ready to strike when she popped out of the smoke. Instead of her form, a shot of raw energy was fired at them, crashing into Crow and breaking it apart. "Shit!" Kankuro cursed before a second shot slammed into his chest, blasting him into the barrier walls and knocking him unconscious. Temari swallowed a lump in her throat as Kuroka casually walked out of the smoke from the branch she was perched upon. "Had enough, Nya?" A nervous sweat formed upon her brow, and she was ready to try and fight her way out before a massive plume of smoke interrupted their fight. The plume originating from where her brother was fighting Uzumaki. Wind style. Severing wind blade, Baki, sensei of the Sand siblings, yelled out as he sent out a sharpened blade of wind that Yugito gracefully avoided with a spinning leap. "Air bullets." He followed up, firing concussive bursts of air from his mouth. To his annoyance, she also swerved around those with that same feline grace. "Blazing claw," she called back, coating her clawed hands in fire-style chakra that took the shape of an enlarged paw. She took a swipe at him, but he managed to leap away from it. This made her smirk as she let go of her hold on the chakra, making it burst out of her hand and fly as a fireball that he stumbled out of the way of. "Damn it," he cursed under his breath as he went through hand seals for his strongest jutsu, Wind Style, Wind Dragon Bullet. Swirling wind formed around him, surrounding him in a hurricane that rose into the air and gathered lingering moisture, giving the serpentine dragon that formed a cloud-like opacity. It snarled at Yugito and glared at her with sickly yellow eyes before diving at her, tearing through the foliage and brush in its way. Yugito, knowing she didn't have a jutsu strong enough to deal with that, looked internally for a counter. "Matabi, can I have some chakra?" "I am with you, kitten," the Biju replied, letting enough of her chakra flow through her host to create a single-tailed cloak of corrosive red chakra. "Make it quick, dear, you know this form takes a toll on you." "Thank you." Surrounded by her partner's power, Yugito dove directly at the wind dragon with her claws stretched before her, spinning her body like a corkscrew. She tore apart the gathered wind chakra before readjusting herself in the air so that her tail could strike Baki in the chest and send him crashing into a tree. When she landed, she took a ready stance and watched warily for any counterattack. However, Baki had taken too much damage and fell atop a tree branch unconscious. With her opponent dealt with, Yugito sighed tiredly and released the Biju chakra she was using. Another bout of exhaustion hit her, but she managed to stay standing. "Okay, now to help Naruto," she murmured to herself before witnessing a massive plume of smoke erupt from where he and Gaara were fighting. "Now what?" Ah! Naruto crashed through a thick tree from the force of Gaara's sand tail, his Tuki shielding him from extra harm. Though he still felt the power of that hit, he got back to his feet and started going through hand seals before he was forced to stop as a blast of sandy wind tore through the brush and carved into the trunk of the tree he was on. Wind style. Infinite sandstorm devastation. Gaara roared, having formed multiple mouths on his sand-covered body to inhale a massive quantity of air. It was enough to have his body swell like a balloon before he unleashed the pent-up storm. He witnessed the destruction caused by his jutsu and grinned maliciously. Is that it, Uzumaki? Is that all you have? Multi-shadow clone jutsu, Naruto declared before the area was covered in smoke. When it cleared, a total of 1,000 Uzumaki were seen facing down Gaara, though the original had lost his shroud of Tuki performing the jutsu. Not even close. They roared as one before leaping as a legion, surrounding Gaara from all directions before throwing shuriken, all-direction shuriken. They declared, covering all avenues of escape and catching Gaara with a multitude of sharpened metal stars. Once there was space, a handful of Naruto clones attacked Gaara from beneath and started to kick him up into the air. Naruto, the original, declared before he and his copies all rushed the airborne redhead, 2K Uzumaki barrage. A bombardment of fists struck Gaara, causing extensive damage to his sand-covered and sending him crashing to the ground below. He groaned in pain, staring up as the multiple blonde copies dove after him. This time, we'll use our legs for a barrage of 4,000 kicks, he announced. Furious at being pushed so far, Gaara roared out, there's no way he'll lose. Chakra surged from him as his eyes changed to that of the sand demon, Shukaku. Not to a guy like him. An explosion of power dispelled all of Naruto's clones and sent him slamming into yet another tree. He coughed out some blood before spitting out the rest from his mouth before staring in shock at the fully formed Biju towering over the forest. Spotting a red spot on its head, he squinted his eyes and saw that it was Gaara's torso poking out. This is the end, Uzumaki, he heard Gaara call out as the Biju pointed its arm at him and curled its claws. In a rush, sand curled around Naruto and started to trap him in a cocoon that would soon crush him to death. He was still able to use his arms though, and quickly bit his thumb before going through hand seals. Hey, Fox, I could really use a hand here, he called out to the Biju, knowing he didn't have enough chakra on his own. I can see that, squandering all your chakra against the weakest of us, what an embarrassment, the Kyuubi insulted. Still, you did manage to hold your own for this long, just be sure to take him down. I will not have my Jinchuriki be beaten by that of the Ichibi. Got it, and thanks, HMPH. You can thank me by winning. Nodding, Naruto took in the offered chakra and formed the necessary seals before slamming his palm on the ground, summoning jutsu. From beneath his form, a massive plume of smoke erupted and he felt his center of gravity quickly change as he was forcibly carried up into the air. The feeling of bark from the trees gave way to rough skin that would rip him apart if he wasn't careful. A hissing growl echoed across the area as the smoke cleared, revealing to the world a giant olive-green reptile with 4 legs, massive jaws, and a wicked tail. A pair of dark green eyes stared at the sand demon, with slit pupils as black as night that were surrounded by a yellowish burst with 6 distinct points. Naruto gave a relieved breath at his successful execution of the jutsu, as well as his success in summoning one of the stronger members of the crocodile basque. 1. Uzumaki, the crocodile spoke, his voice coming out almost like a hiss. I see you managed to finally summon one of the largest of our basque, and for a respectable purpose, as well. A Biju is a worthy opponent for us. Does that mean you'll help me? You may refer to me as Lord Hitokuchi, hatchling, and yes, I shall assist you. I advise you hang on tight and watch out for my more ridged plates. Cleaning blood off my skin has always been a chore, too. Naruto swallowed thickly at that. Why yes, sir, he replied before using what chakra he could to stick to Hitokuchi's head. Temari went paled in fear when she saw Shukaku form above them all, and that fear became terror when she saw Uzumaki respond by summoning a massive reptile that she had never seen before. She wanted to take her brother and run, but she knew she wouldn't be able to get away. Not to mention that her youngest brother was about to relinquish control to the beast within. She wouldn't abandon him like everyone else. Amazing, Kuroka gasped out. Whisker-kun summoned something huge. Looks like a crocodile. They heard Yugito speak up, and they turned to see her dragging a bound Baki behind her. We better clear the area. Battles against Biju usually come with massive collateral damage, and I for one don't want to be in the danger zone. Me neither, NYA. She then turned to Temari and offered, if you surrender, we'll hold you until the Hokage orders your release. Naruto-kun won't kill Gaara if that's what you're worried about. He wouldn't kill someone who understands his situation. His situation? Temari repeated before everything clicked. He's the goddamn Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. With a frustrated groan, she palmed her face and ground out, Father, you are a fucking fool. Does that mean you surrender, NYA? Yeah, sure, whatever, I am done with all this shit, done with it, just tie me up and get us out of here, the fan maiden groused. She could only take so much, after all. Here we go. Hidokuchi cried out before gathering chakra into his gullet, water style, biting water bullet. A building-sized burst of water was fired at Gaara, with the edges of the bullet being razor-sharp and easily carving through the trees. Gaara had the Biju body gather air in its stomach and responded with a wind-style, air bullet. The two jutsu clashed and burst into an explosion of water that rained down over the forest like a storm. Gaara then had sand fire from the body of Shukaku like a hailstorm, but it had no effect against the rough skin of Hidokuchi. He then tensed his hind legs and coiled what he could of his tail like a spring before unleashing the tension and lunging at the Biju's body. Gaara grew afraid at the massive maw of the croc's mouth heading for him and quickly held up a handseal for his last-ditch move. Play possum jutsu, he declared before forcibly falling asleep, relinquishing control to Shukaku. Yeah, I am free, he cheered before leaning to the side and throwing a punch at Hidokuchi. Take this. However, he swung too early and gave the crocodile an opening to clamp his jaws on the outstretched arm. Like a vice, the grip held strong before Hidokuchi's tremendous jaw strength carved into the arm. Tearing it free from Shukaku's body, the Biju howled angrily and moved back while the crocodile gagged for a moment. I never did enjoy the taste of mud or sand, always ruined the flavor during a hunt, he commented in annoyance before gathering more water chakra and firing another massive bullet at Shukaku, which thankfully washed away any lingering sand in his mouth as well. Air bullet, Shukaku fired back, creating another burst of water. However, this time it hampered his vision, leaving him open for Hidokuchi to spin in place and deal a heavy blow with his tail. The sharpened plates of his tail easily cut through the hardened sand that made up his body, slicing the Biju in half from the stomach while his upper body became a victim of gravity and fell forward with a cry of shock. Now, hatchling. Wake up the human and the beast will lose control over him. Right, Naruto replied, gathering one last bit of Tuki to kick off of Hidokuchi's snout and rocket through the air. With perfect aim, he readied his fist and threw a punch that struck home as he roared out, "Wake your ass up, TTE Bayo." Gaara was forcibly awakened from the blow and Shukaku immediately felt his consciousness get pulled back into the shoddy excuse of a seal, "Give me a break. I just got here, damn it." With Gaara awake and Shukaku back in the seal, the body of the Biju lost shape and fell apart as both Jinchuriki fell to the forest below. Breaking through branches, they landed roughly on the ground and struggled to move a muscle. Having witnessed the defeat of the Biju, Hidokuchi smirked at his summoner's success. Not bad, hatchling, not bad at all, he mused before returning to his bask in a plume of smoke. Back with the boys, Naruto was using his chin to drag his body toward Gaara, who had now become terrified at what the Uzumaki was capable of. No, stay away, I won't have my existence be extinguished, don't come any closer. Naruto stopped dragging himself, surprising Gaara when he looked to him with tearful eyes full of understanding and sympathy. I don't want to erase you, Gaara. I know how you are feeling, and I know how much it hurts. Gaara said nothing, too shocked to form words or thoughts. That's why I want to help you. Help me, asked the surprised redhead. Why would you help me after what I did? Why would you want to help a monster who fights only for himself? Because I almost became that very monster too, was Naruto's immediate reply, and Gaara stilled in shock at that statement. Like you, I also carry something within me that makes others look on me in fear. I was so sad and angry that I wanted to make them go away and leave me alone. I almost gave into my pain like you did, but I was able to stop myself when people saw me for who I really was. A soft smile formed on Naruto's face as he thought of the Kuroko, Yasaka, and Kuroka, as well as Iruka and the Ichiraku family. They saved me, and because of that I made a promise to do everything I could to keep them safe, so that I wouldn't lose the people who acknowledge me. Still smiling, Naruto locked eyes with Gaara and continued, you have people like that too, Gaara. Your brother and sister obviously care about you, I witnessed it during your fight with Lee. Memories of times when Tamari showed sincere concern and Kankuro acted in defense of him sprung up in Gaara's mind at the blonde's words, they care. He thought in shock, genuinely surprised that the siblings he had instilled fear into could still feel any kind of care for him. Don't let yourself give into that loneliness anymore, Gaara, you still have people who worry about you, Naruto pressed on, giving his fellow Jinchuriki a supportive grin. And I hope that someday, you and I could be really good friends. He saw Gaara stare at him as if he were crazy, and it only made Naruto grin wider. I believe that you, and me, and all the others like can truly understand one another, if we give ourselves the chance. I don't want to leave behind someone who shares my pain. His grin softened itself to a smile as he finished. So, what do you say? Would you like to have me as a friend, Gaara? A feeling that had become so foreign to Gaara reintroduced itself to him, and that feeling was hope, a hope to be accepted despite what he was, and in Naruto's eyes, as well as in the resurgence of memories concerning his siblings, Gaara saw that hope becoming a reality. With an exhausted smile, Gaara replied, "Yes, I would like that very much, Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto was pleased to hear that, but his own exhaustion was taking hold. The last thing he saw was Yasaka and Kuroko landing next to them. The last words he heard before going unconscious came from Kuroko. "Rest now, darling, you've earned it." He did just that, smiling proudly in his well-deserved sleep. That for now I end story. Thanks for watching.